Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's City Council meeting. As you probably have deduced, we are helping to reduce the transmission of COVID-19 by having our meetings virtually. The return to online meetings follows an increase in COVID-19 cases and updated mask requirements. We are closely monitoring the situation. The council will return with hybrid or in-person meetings when appropriate and safer for the public and city employees. As many of you know, there is no public comment during a work session. However, please join us remotely on October 19th at 7 p.m. for our formal meeting to share any comments you may have. Also, your feedback is always welcome, and you can share with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour comment line at 801-535-7654. Ladies and gentlemen that are joining us, we are actually starting our meeting this afternoon with a closed session. So I will look to my council members for a motion to enter into closed session for advice of counsel. And I think that's all, Katie.
Can you add pending and reasonably imminent litigation, please, Council Chair?
We sure can. Council members, I will look for a motion to enter into closed session for advice of counsel and pending or imminent litigation.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Mono, a second by Councilmember Ferris. I will roll call this. Councilmember Mono?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros?
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Councilmember Wharton is not present at this time. That passes unanimously. Folks, we have another link for the closed session, so hop into that. And for the public, we will see you as soon as we are done with our closed session, hopefully right around the 4 o'clock mark. Thank you. Public, for your patience as we needed to discuss some items. Sorry, I'm not charging, and that makes it difficult to read my agenda. Well, we needed to discuss some items in closed session. We are now in our work session and starting with item number 1. Madam Mayor, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, I will turn the time over to you for updates from the administration.
Thank you. You know there's a slide deck, folks. Thank you, Taylor, or whoever's controlling the slide deck, if you could bring it up. Keep on keeping on there. All right, of course, the item of your formal meeting tonight is to consider extending for another 30 days the mask requirement for K through 12. We'll show you a slide in a moment that came from Dr. Dunn's presentation to the County Council just recently. But in the meantime, we are still in the high transmission level along with every other county in the state of Utah. Some of the cases are down just a little bit, 134 cases down from our 4,300 statewide. Our 7-day case average is still up around 1,400. ICUs are still up in the mid 90s, and COVID utilization is down almost 2% just since our last update. Total COVID, total ICU utilization is still in those mid 90s, which is a very difficult and unsustainable capacity for the hospitals to maintain. Go to the next slide. So you're seeing the case counts with kids still really focused on that 5 to 10-year-old range. A little dip back there at the end of September, but now climbing back up toward higher numbers. If we can go to the next slide, I think we have our school district numbers. Thanks, Taylor. So these are, you can see the student population in the middle column, but none of there isn't a per capita ratio on there. And when it comes back up, you'll see that our school district is still very low. Here we go. Thank you. And the 14-day numbers can be very fluid because as you saw in that last slide, they're going up and down. And there's some curious number changes where even some schools had reported certain numbers, but now those numbers have been allowed to be adjusted downward in the history. So it says, I'm looking at the first 40 days and so those are there's a clear 864, which is pretty dramatically lower than other school districts, particularly when you look at our student populations. So looking at that 14-day community case rate and our eligible community for vaccination being at 62%, we're right up there with Murray City and Canyons at 62 and 63%. So of the kids who could be vaccinated, 62% are. Let's go to the next slide. And we're not seeing much movement since last week in our vaccination rates in any of the 3 Westside zip codes where we have had the highest numbers, still at 77, 46, and 49%, barely moving there. We did see that uptick from September into October, but it seems to have leveled out. And I think that may be my last slide before Andrew's section. Let's see. Unless there's any questions for me, council members.
I don't see anyone. So thank you, Madam Mayor, and we'll turn to Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Chair. I don't see the slides again. I apologize if they're still there. What you'll see when they come up again is slide changes from last week in the, I'll have to go back one slide, actually go forward a slide. You'll see for each of the resource centers, Men's, King, Miller, and then the total. You'll see the total capacity at the top, and then previous week, and then the current week for each of those. You'll see that the occupancy rates have gone up slightly overall, but very, very slightly, still about 93% across all 3 locations. Next slide. I'll say that's significant, partially because usually at the beginning of the month, that first week after checks come out, the rates tend to drop slightly. They really haven't dropped now, which is probably related mostly to weather. You get into this kind of the year, the temperature drops, weather gets more unpredictable, and folks tend to stay in a little more. You'll see Racehorse Fairs, Liberty Park is scheduled, though it may have to be postponed due to weather. And weather's probably going to impact a lot of what we're doing in the coming weeks. Trying not to get out there and do abatements or some resource fairs at times when it's too rainy, windy, inclement weather, that kind of way. So it may disrupt those operations going forward a little bit. Next slide. This is a slide to talk about planning or action. So we've had a lot of discussions about going into the third winter since the movement to the scatter site resource centers about why we continue to have this discussion about overflow in Salt Lake City and using things like temporary land use regulations and those kind of options. This is a slide that talks a little bit about why we end up here consistently. On the left-hand side in the gray, you'll see the coordination, and that's where the Salt Lake Valley Coalition comes in. Listed below them in that box are a lot of the providers, nonprofits primarily, including the city and the county also, who participate in that group, and there's a lot of others as well. And they report straight up to the State Homelessness Council with plans. So on the right, you'll see planning. And you'll see that there's core function or task groups as part of the coalition that look at all those areas, and then a lot of sub areas within those. Some of those, like the, you'll see the crisis response, the emergency shelter. They're meeting every week, sometimes multiple times per week for months now, trying to figure things out. So they're meeting very rapidly, very quickly, consistently, and coming up with plans, which is where that 300 emergency bed idea, 450 permanent supportive housing units came on, and then the specific ideas about how to use ARPA funds towards purchase of hotels or motels to convert them. That's the planning phase. That's been going on for 3 years now. Now, the big issue is you move over to the right and that big question mark in that red arrow to the action phase. All the plans depend on funding and land use from other entities. Salt Lake City is one of them, but you'll see operational funding is generally a mixture of federal, state, city, and county. Capital money this year, which is unique, is that ARPA or CARES money in the last 2 years, primarily through the state, city, and county. And then to actually find a facility, a building to purchase, a place to put people temporarily, whatever it is really a local land use decision by a local city. And then there's private philanthropy as well. So when the coalition does all the planning and puts out plans, it doesn't mean they have the power to take action on them unilaterally. They don't. And this is where a lot of that building relationships through COG and Councilmember Dugan doing a lot of work there, and the mayor doing a lot of work there. That's critical, but it doesn't guarantee there are other options immediately or ever, to be honest with everybody, which is why for a third winter, we're looking at the same discussions about where is everybody going to go. And so when we think about why is the system not working, it may not be a straight planning problem. It may be that there's a gap between the planning piece and those who are planning best practices based on nationwide data, local data, and actually how do you make those actionable is a big gap right now. So we need a lot of work on the system, but I wanted to clarify so when we get frustrated perhaps, we can talk more definitively about where the gaps in the system and how to attack those and address those more effectively as we go forward. I can take questions or I can go to the next slide if that would be helpful for anybody.
You can keep going, Andrew, please.
Okay, next slide. The next slide is a holdover from last week. Wanted to reiterate, perhaps, it was about why some of the factors that are involved in folks who say no to services at times. And we could take more questions on that another time, but I wanted to make sure that's still in the forefront of people's minds because I know you all are getting questions from people about why are folks saying no to services out there. And there's a lot of factors, but one of them is that relationship between trauma, little t and big T trauma, and substance use and how they sort of swirl together oftentimes in folks' lives and inhibit higher executive functioning as far as decision making. And also kind of mood, emotional regulation, all those kind of things. So we can talk about that anytime, but I want to make sure that you have the opportunity and the options for information as people ask you those questions, or you can refer them to us as well. So that is all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. And I just want to reiterate, I know we don't have that slide up right now, but really how helpful that was. And just in remembering, and I want to give a quick shout out to Tim Cosgrove from the administration's office for a really wonderful email response to one of our constituents and a few of our constituents who went out and met with some of our communities that are experiencing homelessness in one of our parks here in Sugar House, and really had such a compassionate email. And a lot of it was about sort of what we see here, and what this slide is that every individual's experience is unique and different and not something that we may understand. And we certainly can't just round people up and put them in a place because we don't want them there. But we have to actually really understand where people are coming from. And I appreciate just it really was a wonderful email, and it's such a compassionate response, and really took a lot of this into account. And I hope that we can continue this conversation. And so I really want to thank you, Andrew, for that.
Well, it's all Tim and Mayor's team. So thank you, Mayor, for hiring the right folks.
I have a comment, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
And this is really like, thanks Tim for that email, and it really shows, I feel like, what we talk, Andrew, and what the gaps are, and what you just said, how unequipped municipalities are to deal with these issues that Madam Chair just said we don't understand, right? Most people don't understand because we're not set up as a system to deal with trauma, substance abuse, mental health issues that need medication, and all of that stuff. So it is, I don't know what's going to take as a society to bring this up, to the front of our conversations, to talk about these issues and talk about the gaps, the real gaps that there's right now. We don't have the capacity nor the funding. We are trying to help this with housing in all of its forms, but we're not once again equipped to deal with the extra layer of issues that some of these folks are experiencing. And so it's a constant thought, when you drive around Salt Lake City streets, at least in District 4, how are we going to help this with the tools that we have, or when is the conversation going to change, and the state and the federal government will really look into these issues that are so prevalent, not just in Salt Lake City, but obviously nationwide. But for the folks that are watching, think about this. If you have those questions, look at these slides and look at the work that we're doing, the things that we're equipped to do. Thank you.
All right, council members, any other comments or questions for Madam Mayor Mendenhall or Andrew? Andrew, you have to remind me of what your title is, because I'm pretty sure last night when I was visiting with some Kansas City folks that were in town, I just kept calling you the homeless czar. And I know that is not okay, but that you were really trying to do good work. And I kept singing your praises yesterday, and I need to know what your the person who's going to solve homelessness is then what I came up with. So I need a title for you, an acronym.
Director of Homeless Policy and Outreach.
I like it. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is updates on the racial equity and policing. We have Allison Rowland here from council staff. Oh, Madam Mayor.
I think that Chief Brown had a safety update for you, but if
You
it's
might
not on
be
your
right.
agenda, Chief, am I right about that?
Yeah. We're here, but we can do rep first, whatever you'd like.
Well, Chief, I didn't know if yours was part of the body worn camera discussion or if you had just a general update, and I'm happy to turn to you for a general update right now.
Yeah, no, Madam Chair, thank you. I do. Again, it's on staffing. If we could start the slide deck, please. Next slide. All right. Staffing. Council. Our response times have been in the media lately, and I wanted to point out a few things to you. I know that me as the chief, that I've been receiving emails. I know that I've been receiving texts and calls. I know the mayor has, and I know you have as well. Our response times, when we look at them, have continually climbed over the year of 2021. In August of 2021, our response to priority one calls went up to 17 minutes and 34 seconds. I'm here to tell you that is not acceptable. That is not what we want. This police department is going to do better. Our community deserves better. And our police officers want nothing more than to respond to calls to the communities they serve in a timely manner. So what I did is 1734 from 13 minutes in July to 17 was quite a jump. I asked our CompStat unit, who are made up of professional analysts, to look into that. Number one, to tell me, was the number right? And if there are any drivers that we can identify as to what was pushing that up. I want you to know they did a fantastic job. They dropped everything they possibly could. They put in over 250 hours going through these calls by hand to make sure it was right. And their conclusion is that it was. They're experts in their field. The one thing that we talked about is what is driving this up. And I think it's a lot of things. I don't think we could put our finger on one thing. We're going to continue to look at that, but most importantly, we're going to look at what we can do to reduce calls for service, this response time in the future. And I'm happy to report today that we ran the numbers for September of 2021. The time is down to 14 minutes and 14 seconds. That's a 3-minute and 20-second drop. That's good, but that's not great. That's not where it needs to be. As the chief, my goal is to have it under 10 minutes. That's what our community deserves, and that's what we're going to get to. Now, 1414 is more in line with what we were seeing May, June, and July of 2020. But again, that's not where we want to be. We can do better. And if you look back to September of 2020, the response times, just for historical information, was 14 minutes and 18 seconds. So, next slide, please. What could be, one of the things that drives call response, it's the number of calls that we are responding on, but it's not just the calls, it's the type of calls, the call volume, the staffing numbers of our officers, the number of officers on each time, the distance that officers are traveling to get to these different calls. If somebody has to go east-west through the city, it's much harder and takes much more time to get there. But if you look at the average calls per service, priority 1s through 4, if you go back historically and look at 2018, on a daily basis, we were averaging 254 calls for service. 2019, 266. 2020, 300. 2021, in the 9 months, we're averaging 310. So as we've talked about many times in these council are going up, and that's having an impact on the response times. And council, as we go along, any questions, please raise your hand or jump in, or we can talk at the end.
Just real quick, Chief, council members, I can't really see anybody. So if you have anything, just politely interrupt Chief Brown if you want to jump in and ask a question, please. Thanks,
Madam Chair. Chief, are those priority 1 calls for service numbers or total calls for service?
That was an average. Yeah, Councilmember Mono, that was an average of priority 1 and through 4s. So 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was priority 1s. On you're talking on the response times?
No, the total number received, the 254 up to 310, that's total calls in a day.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Correct. Thank you. Next slide.
Chief, with the increasing number of calls on a consistently rising, do we need to adjust staffing levels or approved staffing levels?
Councilmember Ferris, that's a great idea. That's something that I've talked with the mayor about. But I think more importantly, we need to fill up the FTEs that we don't have right now. Then let's look at where we're at and see where we need to go as a city. Because sometimes what we've looked at is a snapshot in time. Our city is very dynamic. It's growing. It's a commuter city where many people come down here to work and play. And so all these things drive our response. But good question. We need to fill up what we have and then look to what we may need in the future strategically.
Sounds wise. Thank you.
So right now, our authorized staffing is 571. And people will say, well, Chief, that's the highest you've ever had. A couple things play into that. 66 of those 571 are airport officers. They do not have the ability to leave the airport and come out and take those calls for service. So if you take the 55 vacant sworn positions we have, and they're dropping, last week it was 59, but they're coming down. We have 516 officers available to take calls within the city. Now, we have, as we've talked, many of our staff are in academies, FTO, and different portions of training, and we'll soon, and I'm telling you, soon they'll be hitting the streets, and that's where we need them. Next slide, please. Just Monday, we welcomed 5 lateral officers to the Salt Lake City ranks. These are experienced, tenured officers that have certifications within the state, which means they've come to Salt Lake City because this is where they want to be. They've left their other agencies for the opportunities that Salt Lake City brings, for the pay. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to serve here and in a police department that has every type of assignment in the gambit as it relates to policing. But these officers will start a 2-week academy, and then they will be paired in an FTO program, not as just a 1-officer car, but a 2-officer car, which means they will immediately be an addition of 5 officers addressing calls for service come November 1st of this year. Next slide.
Chief, can I interrupt you again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, at our update in September 21st, the numbers that I had written down were that we had 51 vacancies, but 46 of the filled positions were still in training. And now you're saying there's 55, but that has come down. Am I not comparing apples to apples?
No, but what we have is sometimes in there are pending vacancies. People have basically announced their retirements or their resignations. So those fall out, and you have to account for those. So right
You
now,
actually have 4 additional vacancies today as compared to September.
right?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going down.
Okay. All right, so here's the projections of where we're at with our staffing. This looks a very busy slide, but let me kind of walk you through this. Class 153, that is the class that started back in January of this year. When we hired 20 officers, we're down to 19, but they will be hitting the streets. They've been through their full academy of 22 weeks. They've been through FTO. They'll be hitting the streets on November 21st of this year. 17 officers coming into the streets to fill up some of those vacancies. 2 will be joining them shortly after that in December. Class 154 started in August of 20. They will be hitting the streets in June of 2022. Class 152 is the lateral academy that started Monday. Again, they'll be hitting the streets on November, able to take calls for service and impact that response time on priority 1 calls. Class 156, we're hoping to have another lateral academy in hopefully December, if not 1st of January, anywhere from 5. We'll take as many as we can get, but we're hoping for at least 5. Class 157 would be a new hire class that would start in January. We're shooting for 30, and we're making great progress on that. And then we'll add another class in May of 2022 of 30. So you can see, Council, we have stacked the pipe with a lot of academies. We've made training a priority, as Deb, Director Alexander, and myself talked to you about. And so hopefully, as we move through these academies, these response times are going to drop. And the type of service that we want to share and have with our community will be where we need it to be. Now, we're not resting on just that. If you go to the next, oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Madam Chair, may I add something there? Thanks. some of, I think, Madam Chair, you were on the council perhaps when we had the third-party audit done on staffing levels. And there have been some questions about, well, why didn't we add officers? We did add 50 officers the year before that, and there was neither the sales tax revenue or really the political willingness with the administration at the time to continue the discussion about adding even more. And as Chief said, we have more officers on patrol right now than perhaps in my lifetime, but at least for a very, very, very long time. And I want to just say that Chief and I, in our discussions about this pipeline and the velocity really at which Salt Lake City is adding officers right now, which I would wager is faster than any other department in the state of Utah. We want to keep seeing how we're doing as we restock the 55 open paid positions that we have right now. What is our call time looking like? What's the qualitative experience out there on the streets with the community-based policing? And I just want to queue up for the council that we'll continue to obviously have these weekly conversations and check-ins with you, but let's see what the department is like in terms of the crime and the quality of safety in the city, and see if we need to talk about adding more officers. But with these 55 existing vacancies, I think, as Chief said, it's a little early for us to start talking about adding even more before we have our officers back in the queue. But just to put that long-term conversation out there, I am interested in getting to that conversation if the results show that we still need more.
Madam Mayor, sorry, I swallowed a peanut wrong, but I appreciate you bringing that up, and especially the qualitative part of it. I know that it has been a priority for the council, for the administration, and for Chief Brown to really work with our rep commission to look at that quality. I think Chief Brown brings this up all of the time about Pastor Davis saying, it's about having the right officers. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, Madam Mayor, just so that we continue to have that conversation. This conversation is ongoing and evolving forever. And so I appreciate Chief Brown and the administration really working within all of that and looking at that qualitative component to things, and can't wait till we get these new officers out there and get to kind of say, where are we, how are we doing, and do our metric check, right? And kind of our gut check on what's going on out in the community. So thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry to interrupt and hijack your presentation.
That's
Chief.
Madam Chair and Mayor, thank you so much. To your point, Madam Chair, we have had about 66 lateral officers put in to come to this organization, which would easily fill that 55. But guess what? They're not the caliber officers we want here. So we're very selective, and we pick the ones that we know will meet the standards that you have and that what our community has for policing. Next slide. There's a lot going on in the police department. We're trying and looking at every angle of ways that we can better serve, to perhaps take some of these calls for service off our shoulders and give to other stakeholders. We're looking at a call diversion program, and we've talked about this as well. There are certain calls when people call in and say, hey, this is what I need, and this is the situation I find myself in. They don't need a police response. And in working with dispatch and some of the nonprofit providers and different agencies, we are able to divert some of those calls to these other agencies that can help in a much better way. Another thing we're looking at, and Mayor's driving a lot of this, and it's a great idea. We're going to hire back a police civilian response team. But the first part of that is going to be retired officers. We have great retired officers that have been here for 10, 20, 30 years. Well, they have to be 20 years to be retired, sorry, at least 20. That they have a lot of experience and knowledge with very little training, can start and jump into a telephonic response. So many times the calls that we have can be done over the phone. And so if we have an officer that can do that, or a retired civilian officer that can do that, we don't have to send an officer out to do that. So that is in the works, and we hope to roll this out hopefully in the next couple weeks. The other thing is working with our fire department on perhaps an alternate response to some of the calls that they go on. Individuals that are medically down or things that really don't require a police response. But here's the caliber of the officers we have, and this is what we'll continue to do. Our officers every day answer the bell and respond to these calls for service. They start their shift. They'll go, and I know because I've ridden along with them on afternoon shifts and graveyard shifts, they take call after call after call. And many times a call of higher priority will come in, and they'll basically say, and if you ever listen to the radio, they'll say, stack this call or hold my paper, I'll respond to that. They're dropping their reports and they're taking these higher priority calls. At the end of the shift, sometimes they'll have 5 or 6 reports that they have to write. Many times they don't get a lunch. They take a lunch or they bring a lunch. They'll maybe hit a convenience store for a quick snack, or they'll bring a lunch. But this is the type of officers that we have that are willing to put forth that effort to serve this community. So that's what I have, and I'd be happy to take any call or questions you may have.
Chief, well, council members, any questions for the chief?
I have a question.
Mila?
Chief, on the hiring of retired officers, my understanding is that there's a state law that needs to be amended in order for that to become a little bit easier. Is there anything that we as council members can do to help advocate for that? Or do you have an update on where that is in the process? Or am I entirely incorrect and that's not the case?
No, Councilmember Morrow, that's a great question. We, right now, if an officer retires, they have to sit out of the game for a year before they can come back and be a police officer. There is conversation to reduce that time. That can, but that is to come back as an officer. An officer who's retired that comes back to work in a civilian position doesn't have to have that same wait time. So, but we have a lot of officers that would love to come back and do some of that on a part-time basis, which would, it benefits us greatly.
Thanks for that clarification.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So Chief, that civilian response team would really be handling like the priority 3 calls just over the phone, or maybe going door to door with some people?
Yes, we would like, I think both the matrix and the rep has talked about a civilian response. And so the telephonic officers would be the first phase of that, but we would love to build that into a, priority 3 or priority 4 response. You're absolutely right. Some of the lower level calls that they can go out and handle that wouldn't require an officer. Yep.
Yeah, that's exciting, because I think that would take a lot of pressure off the sworn officers and a lot of the stress too on those calls, and help this response time too. So wonderful. I'm excited about that implemented.
Council members, any other questions? Chief, I just want to throw this out there, that if I could set up a small group meeting with you, any other council member that's interested, just on discussing some pretextual stops and what we're doing as a department to sort of address what those pretextual stops look like and things like that. So we don't need to discuss it now. I just want to throw it out there and maybe set up a time that we can have some discussion about that for my own personal knowledge.
Okay. I'll make myself available anytime.
Thank you, Chief. Council members, if there is, don't move, Chief, because you're still on the spot. If there is no other question, we're going to skip the rep update. We'll get back to that. But since we have the chief and we're on the discussion, we'll go straight to agenda item number 3, which is the policing discussion regarding body worn cameras. So we do have Ben Ledke here from the council office, obviously Chief Brown, and we have Megan Hardesty, I'm sorry if I said your name incorrectly, who is the National Sales Director of Axon, I believe, Tiffany Vandenberg, Esmail Ansari, and Captain Scott Tierlink. So we have a number of people to have this discussion with. But as always, we're going to start out with council staff. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The council has been holding a series of briefings about policing topics. Discussions earlier this year included the social worker program, police officer recruitment, hiring, promotions, and trainings. These past discussions are available to watch or read the materials on the council's Racial Equity and Policing webpage, as well as on YouTube. The discussion today is about body-worn cameras. There's a staff report with background information in the meeting packet, and I've got some quick reminders and highlights for you. In December last year, the council adopted a body-worn camera ordinance. This is City Code Chapter 2.10.200. This codified existing practices, policies, and mayoral executive orders, and it added some new requirements. That ordinance is available as attachment 1. The police department reports implementation is progressing to satisfy the ordinance requirements. Additional time, training, technology, and/or funding may be needed. In June this year, Matrix Consulting presented the final report for the council's operations audit of the police department. The full audit report is available as attachment 2. And on page 3 of the staff report, there are 5 key findings and 9 recommendations about body cameras taken from the audit final report. The police department has stated that 2 of those recommendations have been implemented, another 2 are in progress, and the remaining 5 are a city decision for the administration and the council to discuss. There have been 3 recent appropriations by the council related to body cameras. First, in the annual budget this year, you approved $1.2 million ongoing for the next generation of body cameras, so every police officer has one. Note that this funding also provides tasers to all officers, unlimited video and audio data storage. Those cameras produce a lot of data that needs to be stored and readily retrievable. And it also covers the licensing. The funding is intended to allow replacement of the body cameras every 3 years. This is an ideal rotation schedule so that the equipment is well functioning. The second recent appropriation, also in the annual budget, you provided almost $350,000 for body camera software upgrades. The package includes several software programs, they're bundled together, and it also is provided by a private company called Axon. We have representatives of Axon here today to provide an overview of that software. Note that some of the software programs could help with implementing the requirements in the ordinance from last December. The third and last budget item is $93,000 from last fiscal year. That funding was to install on police vehicles the automatic camera activation hardware. This funding lapsed after it was not used in fiscal year 21. There's about 300 police vehicles that may still need this hardware. If the council is interested, then you could request the administration include that funding in an upcoming budget amendment. That's it for my introduction. I'll turn the time over to Axon for a presentation summarizing the several software programs that was recently funded in the annual budget. Then the police department has an implementation update and additional background for you in a second presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ben. I am assuming, since I saw Tiffany's tile come on, that you are giving us the Axon presentation. Is that assumption correct?
Yes, Amy, actually, this is Megan Hardesty. Tiffany and I are together, so I'm just playing her for the moment here.
Well, it's all yours.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, Counsel, for inviting Axon to participate in today's session. As I mentioned, I'm Megan Hardesty, the account representative for Axon for the Salt Lake City Police Department. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So Salt Lake City Police Department has been a valued partner of Axon for many years. And in the summer months of 2021, we expanded this relationship to include additional technology features of our Officer Safety Plan program. So as a technology provider, we recognize the challenges that law enforcement face today. And our goal is to provide a comprehensive offering of hardware devices and also software features that simultaneously support officers every day in the field, while also providing agencies the ability to improve transparency for their community, and then also improve internal workflows that are related to digital evidence. If we could go on to the next slide. So at Axon, when building technology solutions, we really consider the life cycle of an event. So from initial call for service to when digital evidence is presented in the courtroom. The Officer Safety Plan, it really focuses on these 4 core pillars that you see here on the screen to represent how the Axon solution impacts the workflow of data from initial capture via the body camera all the way to the management of that digital evidence after that event has occurred. So this initial phase that you see here is activation, which really focuses on the importance of ensuring that body camera is recording when an incident takes place. So whether an officer arrives on scene with lights and sirens on, or they activate their taser, these triggers are going to send signals automatically to activate a recording of the body camera so that you don't miss a critical moment in that incident. As we know, critical incidents are no doubt dynamic, and in an involving situation, supervisors and maybe even watch commanders, they may find benefit with utilizing our Respond platform to visually see on a map where a camera is currently recording, and therefore that would give an indication of where the officer is located, or even potentially live stream that recording as it's taking place to best support that officer. So as the incident comes to a resolution or has ended, officers have the ability in that second column, you'll see capture. So they can capture digital evidence from witnesses using the Citizen for Officers or the capture tool to take their own photos or audio statements. Citizen for Officers, it's a really easy to use tool that really helps officers seamlessly gather photos and videos from community members to gather evidence for their investigation and allow citizens really to be part of the solution for making their community safer. So overall, the intent of the tools within these activation and capture categories is to simplify an officer's experience with gathering digital evidence while also improving the customers and the citizens' experience with providing digital evidence to the officers. So at times, an officer, they may be involved in an incident that has the potential to threaten the safety of the officer or other individuals that are involved at the scene. So should a situation escalate, our focus is on de-escalation and preparation, as you see in that third column. With that said, the Officer Safety Plan includes virtual reality training, which is meant to supplement the current training curriculum. When we launched in 2020, virtual reality training, it included scenarios related to identifying and managing individuals with schizophrenia, PTSD, and those attempting suicide. The intent of the training is to allow officers the opportunity not only to verbally de-escalate the situation, but also allow officers to step in the shoes of the person that they're encountering. We refer to this type of training as empathy-focused training. Our next generation VR solution, which will be available to Salt Lake City Police Department as part of this Officer Safety Plan, it will enhance the VR experience by creating more complex and dynamic scenarios. We'll have multiple officer engagement simultaneously, and we'll also introduce the potential usage of devices that they may need in that particular scenario. So moving on here to the last phase. Lastly, once the digital evidence has been uploaded into evidence.com in the DEM solution, we have provided a variety of software tools to assist the department with effectively managing that evidence. So this area we call productivity, and it's been the primary enhancement for the department with the Officer Safety Plan. So Axon's goal is to provide tools that streamline the administrative paperwork for an officer so that he or she maybe quickly get back on the street to serve the community. While back at the station, tools such as Redaction Assistant, they utilize AI to automatically detect license plates, faces, MDTs, which really helps expedite that redaction process when a video has been being prepared for public release. The officer safety plan also includes a metric tool, which we call Performance, that gives agencies the ability to confirm that body camera usage aligns with policy expectations on when body camera video should be recorded. And then furthermore, to assist with the investigation process, the officer safety plan includes transcription services. This feature uses transcription in an AI format where it's allowing agencies to transcribe body-worn camera video, interview room video, or really any third-party video in order to more efficiently review evidence for keywords or phrases. All right, appreciate the opportunity to highlight the officer safety plan for you today. Of course, again, appreciate Council's time and then also the support of these technology enhancements for the police department.
Thank you, Megan. Council members, do you have any questions at this time? I just want to know why the prosecutor can never send me Axon videos that I can actually open on my computer. I'm just kidding. Chief, I think, did you guys have a presentation as well?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Council. We do. Megan, thank you for that. That was a great overview of the products that you provide for us. I have with me today Captain Scott Tierlink and Sergeant Mason Gibbons, who really have been instrumental. Captain Tierlink has been working with body cameras. I mean, in the history of body cameras within this agency, we have had cameras since 2013. That's a long run. That's almost a decade of a partnership with Axon and cameras. But the real value is it provides to the city, to the taxpayers, and our community important levels of accountability and transparency. And so we have now over 550 cameras within the organization. And they are the newest, best cameras out there. So Council, thank you for continually to fund these. It's important to the work that we do. Salt Lake City is on the right side of history and has been for many years. It's hard to imagine an agency or an officer going out to work the streets without this type of capability and technology. But with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Captain Tierlink and Sergeant Gibbons to kind of walk through some of the things that we have implemented and where we're at with some of these different programs and plans. So if you have questions, again, you can jump in as we go along or we can talk at the end. Captain Tierlink.
Thank you, Chief. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So as Chief Brown mentioned, we've had a long history of using body-worn cameras, and Axon has been a great partner with Salt Lake City Police Department since 2013. We were one of the early adopters. When there was body cameras were first coming out, Salt Lake City was one of the first agencies that really embraced the body-worn camera and implemented it on every officer in our police department. So since that time with Axon, we've seen a lot of upgrades and improvements, and they've been a great partner all along. It provides our city taxpayers and our community a great level of accountability and transparency. And currently we have more than 550 body-worn cameras. Every officer, every sworn officer in our department has a body-worn camera issued to them and is using that. Next slide. We also are innovators. We recently were running into a problem because we had our officers are using their body cameras, they're tagging their videos, and then they also need to document if they use their body camera or if there was a problem, a malfunction, or if they muted it for any reason, they were to document that in a report. And on a case-by-case basis, that works great. However, when we want to try to look at historical data and see what happened in the last month or the last year, that becomes very difficult to pull up reports and say, okay, how many times were officers muting and for what reasons? That would entail reading thousands of reports to try to glean that information. And not every case ends in a report either. In some cases, you may pull somebody over and talk to them and it doesn't end in a report. So we had a problem tracking all of that. So we recently worked with our records management provider and we worked with them on implementing a new and innovative technique within their system where we designed a tracking and reporting of your body-worn camera button. And that works on our MDTs now. So anytime an officer uses their camera, they click the button and then they can quickly and easily document that use. And I'll show you that on the next slide. So kind of small screenshots there, but the officer, there's a small button that says BWC for body worn camera. When they click that, it pulls up an option of the green one just means it's been activated. The yellow means you activated it and muted it during some portion of that call. And the red one is that it was not activated. If you hit the green one, then the officer is done. It's all been documented correctly. If you hit the yellow or the red, then it pops up that third box, which has a reason why they did that. And then from there, we can, if you go to the next slide, we'll show that once they do that, it keeps that log, and then it's very easy to pull up. And so this is the list now of all the officers that activated their body camera. If they activated, it just shows their unit number, their badge number, the date, the time, and the case number. If it didn't result in a case, it will still note it here. It'll have all the same information, but no case number. If they did anything other, if they muted it, or if there was a malfunction or they failed to activate it, then there's another column that populates with their reason why that happened. So with that, we're now able to much better show compliance and be able to report on our body camera usage. So that's very productive for us to be able to do that, and shows a greater transparency of how we're utilizing these tools.
Captain, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you get this for every camera?
Yes. So every person that has an MDT, so that's all the officers in the field, they're getting dispatched by their MDT. So where we implemented it is on that system. So it does a status update on the computer-aided dispatch log, and it updates the status of the camera to activated, and then that allows us to pull those details up quickly and easily. So again, not 100% foolproof, because there are times where somebody might not have an MDT, but much faster and easier to pull these reports. And we're actually working with our vendor now to try to implement the same thing on a mobile device as well, so that if they don't have their MDT, they can still do the timestamp there as well.
And can you remind me what MDT means again?
Yeah, it's a mobile data terminal. So that's the laptop that's in the officer's car that they receive the dispatch information on. And
if there were a reason that somebody didn't have an MDT, what would that reason be?
At times it might be the bike units who leave their car and now are deep into the park and don't have their MDT readily available. Or our motor officers out doing traffic enforcement might not have their MDT with them if they're on their motors.
And so the idea of working with Axon to put it on a mobile device would be so like bike officers or foot patrol or something like that would be able to have like that on their phone or whatever, right?
Yes, and actually we're working with our vendor for our CAD and our RMS, our dispatch system, to get that button on that. They're the providers of the mobile data terminals.
Got it. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, next slide. So recently, Council funded the additional money to move us to the Axon OSP 7+ software package. That is a tremendous benefit to the citizens of Salt Lake City, as well as to the police department. And I'll just kind of go over a couple of the features that we're very anxious to start using, and they've already been activated, but some of them will take a little bit of time to get set up and trained and start implementing on them. The first one is Axon Performance. This is a way that we can track the system health of all of our cameras and batteries, so that we make sure that our equipment is functioning properly, maintained properly. It also helps with tracking, auditing, and enforcing compliance to body-worn cameras. And instead of finding problems a month or a year later when we run reports, it's on a dashboard, so we can see concerns as they're happening and address those very quickly now. The next one is our Axon Respond Plus. That enhances our tactical ability when we're responding to complex situations where we might have multiple officers coming in from different directions. We can see that on a map. We can have a much better situational awareness, and so some great tools there for us to better serve the community there. Next slide. The Axon Citizen for Community. So there's two versions of Axon Citizen. The first one is Citizen for the Community. This allows us when there's a major event where we may have witnesses that we have no idea were there. By the time we get there, there might be hundreds of witnesses and only a few dozen or a few left. This allows our agency to push out a link to the community and do a press release, put it on social media and our website where anybody can click that link and then send us any digital evidence that they may have captured. So they could send a video that they recorded from their smartphone, a video from their surveillance on their house, or pictures, audio, whatever that may be. They can click that link and send it into Axon. It goes into our evidence.com section and it is tagged as related to that case. And when the detectives then review it, they can either accept it in as evidence, or they can say that's not relevant, and it goes into an area where it's then held for a time before it would eventually be purged from there.
Sorry,
Next.
Captain.
Yeah.
How does one determine whether something is relevant for evidence or not? I mean,
Yeah, that's why we.
my like criminal defense attorney brain is coming out right now, as you can see. But I do worry that something that somebody in the community would be uploading. We have this great technology and a great way to make sure that we're being transparent and accountable and doing investigations. But then we have maybe the officer on duty or the detective or whoever it was determining whether something or not something is relevant or not.
Yeah, and that's the detectives are very well trained in that. That's what they do already anyway, is they go out and they determine what is evidence, and they carefully collect that evidence. If there's any doubt, they would keep it as evidence. And if it's something that is clearly not related to the case, that's where they could say, yeah, that's not going to be related to this case. It might be somebody that wasn't on that same call and send it to that link anyway. However, even if they determine that it's not evidence, like I say, it goes into a holding place where it can be stored for whatever time period we put on that tag. So typically it's still going to be stored for 18 months. So if there was ever any question, it's not like it's just been, oh, bad decision and it's deleted. It's like, oh, wait, now that we investigate it more, maybe that is relevant. It's there for 18 months to bring in.
And is that just department policy that you kind of hold it for 18 months? Is that just protocol? Is it just kind of something that has been put into practice and you keep doing type thing, or?
Yeah, that 18 months is just an example. We would look with our detectives and see what an appropriate time for that category is now that we have this tool. Typically 18 months is what we keep an officer's video that activates their body-worn camera accidentally. That goes into a holding place for a time. We could keep it as long as we want. So that's highly customizable in the software package. We just set what term we want to hold that for, anywhere from 6 months to indefinite.
Thank you. And I just got word that, and I can't see anybody, so I apologize, that there might be council members with other questions. So please feel free to jump in and interrupt. Chris, did you have a question?
Nope, wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we are excited about this. We feel like this will enable us to get evidence that maybe would have walked away and we would have never been able to find with somebody that might have taken a picture and then left the scene and So it gives us another opportunity to reach out and get more evidence for things. So we think it'll be a great tool.
Captain Tierlink, I have a quick question. Wondering what sort of format is this putting it into? How easily can it be analyzed for any information or feedback on, I don't know, what kind of stuff are we looking for and how do we access it and, you know, how is it utilized? Makes sense.
Yeah, so once it gets uploaded into the system, the other thing that Axon provides a nice tool that they have is no matter what format it comes into, it gets the evidence gets converted into the format that is usable by our evidence.com software. And the reason that we use evidence.com is there is a lot of protections built into it. We don't save it to a file that's super easy to just send somebody a JPEG for them to watch. And we do that on purpose. We have people use evidence.com logins to view that evidence because then we have an audit trail of who's looked at the evidence, who's disseminated the evidence, all of those things. But once it comes into the system, it gets converted into a format that is usable for evidence.com.
So it gives us easy access to it, but do we have anything like an AI that can skim through all of this data and find any discernible patterns? I don't know, look for anything other than, or do we have to specifically go to a specific video looking for a specific issue?
Yes, right now there are tools that do that. There's some that we looked at and proposed, but have not been able to get funding for yet. There's one that is called BriefCam that does a lot of those analytics for us that you can type in specific information and it will scan through the entire video and take hours worth of video and show you 7 minutes that shows every red car that drove through the scene at that time. So there are some analytic tools that would help with a lot of those things, but as of right now, the tools that we have through Axon don't have the analytics on that portion yet.
Okay, thank you.
And next slide. So some of the other tools, we do have the Axon Transcription, and especially when things go to court, we like to transcribe the interviews or some of the things that we may capture. So Axon has an automatic transcription process for the videos that we capture. And of course, we would still go through those and ensure that they're correct. But to have that automatically transcribed would save a lot of time from having to do that from scratch. And then I already kind of talked about this one with the previous question with the Axon third-party video support, where it helps collect evidence and converts it into a format that we can view. Next slide. So we have all of these features already now, and we've been able to access and start to use many of the features already. We're working to send our technology team right now to an Axon training the first couple of days in November, where we'll get some training on some of these features, and then we'll also work with Axon to bring in some additional training as needed to help us with configuring some of these systems and ensuring that we're trained on those. So our goal is to try to be up and running with everything fully trained and fully operational by January 1st. That's pretty aggressive through the holidays, but I think that with my history with Axon, their products are very user-friendly. So once we get the help with setting up some of these systems, it should be pretty easy to train and start using most of them. And then the one example of where we have used the Axon Citizen for the community, we recently had a homicide investigation. There was a lot of public comments of people wanting to help with that. That would be a great time where we would be able to use this new tool and send out a link and open that for people to submit other pieces of evidence for us. Next slide. And I'll turn the time over to Sergeant Gibbons to go through and talk about some of the things that Matrix brought up in their audit report.
Thanks, Cap. All right, so again, we're just going to kind of cover some of the recommendations that were provided by the Matrix report. The first being maintain our current body worn camera auditing procedures by supervisors. That has been ongoing and no change there. So that one is a check. The second one, update body worn camera policy to include mandatory audits by supervisors. This is being done, but this is being done in the form of a chief's memo, which for those who are not familiar with the way the department operates, a chief's memo is a directive from the office of the chief, which does, it is enforceable as an order, just as policy is, and announces things, it puts together programs, it may amend things that are within policy. And this is a better vehicle for the body worn camera audit because it will allow us to make the modifications that we need to if we were to say need to track a new metric or new criteria for reporting purposes. Whereas if you implement it into policy, there are more steps. It's a much more intensive policy, or excuse me, process to amend the policy. So the directive that governs the mandatory auditing for supervisors is in place in the form of a chief's memorandum, again, which is an order. The next one is conduct annual random small body worn camera audits by the audit and inspection unit. And this is one that we are currently looking at. We're evaluating, trying to decide what would be the best way going forward as far as implementation. We're weighing out the necessity as well with this. So this is in progress. The final bullet on this slide is your post the body worn camera compliance on the public website. And again, this is in process. I believe it's a function of finding a dashboard that will provide the data in an effective and way that translates so that people can understand the data. Any questions? Okay, next slide. Again, most of the recommendations that came from the Matrix report do not actually apply to the police department for implementation. So we just wanted to refresh everybody as far as what those are with the police civilian review board, the independent auditor that would review 20 videos per month. Also, they would be given the additional responsibility of reviewing the use of force. They would need to publish an additional report. And then they would work together with our audit and inspection unit to make sure that the metrics established for both reporting purposes are what we need for the needs of the city. Next slide. So it's already been referenced once before, but we do have our body worn camera ordinance through the city, number 54 of 2020. And we are incorporating those, the language into there, making sure that it does align with the policies for the police department. The thing to keep in mind, and we'll show you on the next slide here, there are multiple directives that come into play. We want to make sure that everything lines up and that all aspects of the standards for each entity are being met from the police department. The things that will help us going forward, some of them we've already mentioned, the MDT button, mobile data terminal button, Axon Performance. These are programs, these are software that are really going to help us to get the data to be able to report effectively. So those are in the process. Next slide. And again, here are the directives that go along with body worn camera. We have first and foremost state statute 777A, which dictates at the state level what is required of an officer. You have the city ordinance, which we just saw on the last slide. We also have our city policies, procedures, the mayor's executive order, which would refer to the OICI video releases. And then we have our internal policies, which would be 422 and our procedure 408. And as the policy manager for the department, this is something that we're really trying to balance and make sure everything is in line. All aspects of each standard have been met. Any questions on that? Thank you for your time. I'll send it back to the captain.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So I was just going to talk about those other tools that were mentioned by Axon earlier, the which is the automatic activation of their body worn camera. So that's called Axon Signal. The device can be automatically activate any camera within a range of that. And we've got three things that will trigger that. One is the vehicle. And as Ben mentioned earlier, we've got 100 of our vehicles that have that in there right now. To get all of our first response vehicles with that would be about another 150 units of those. So we will get the cost estimate of the device plus the cost estimate from fleet to have those installed, and then we will present that to council to if that's something that they're interested in doing with us. The other one is the firearm holsters, so that when an officer draws their firearm, it activates the body worn camera. This one has been the most troublesome for us right now. We're working with Axon on it right now. We have not been able to successfully implement that with our holsters. It triggers a lot of false alarms just from simple movements so far. And so we're trying to determine if it's a problem with the holsters that we use or some way that we can tweak that to improve that. And then the other one is embedded within the tasers that we have. When the taser is switched on, it activates the body worn cameras. And then in addition to that, then it's just manually activating the body worn cameras as well. Next slide. And then we also have the new Axon tasers that were purchased as part of this package. Again, that signal device is in those. These are much improved tasers. They are a tremendous tool for law enforcement and are a great de-escalation device and have a great life-saving tool that we have. So we appreciate the new tasers, which have a lot better accuracy and a lot better use on those. So we're anxious to start using those. And then the holster that we have, I already mentioned, that we're working with to try to eliminate the glitches and all of the unnecessary activations from that. Next. Improvements from the next generation of body-worn camera. So with the new body-worn cameras that we have and being able to replace and upgrade those every 3 years is a tremendous tool. Like I say, we've been with Axon since 2013, and up until recently, some of our body-worn cameras were becoming a little bit out of date as far as battery life not working as well. We were able to upgrade some along the way, but our biggest problem was the cords. When an officer would get into any altercation, the camera would come flying off of them and the cord would get yanked out. And so it was very, very hit and miss on what we would get. The new body worn cameras are cordless, just a one single device, and much better camera view, much better battery life, and a lot more tools with it also. So great upgrade for the body worn cameras that we have. Next. And the final notes that we have, we're looking to develop the data dashboard on our public website to have the results of our body-worn camera audits available for review. In June 2021, we had the matrix that found that the officers were properly activating their camera 92% of the time. That is a really high rate compared to a lot of agencies that were compared with us. And with these new tools with Axon Performance, we feel that we can actually improve that even from there. So we're very appreciative of the new tools, and we're excited to implement those and use those to the best use that we can. And with that, that's all I have. I'll turn it back over to the chief.
Thank you, Captain Tierlink, and thank you, Sergeant Gibbons, and thank you, Counsel, for your time. And again, as always, appreciate the tool, the funding, the support. And if you have any questions, we can talk now, or if you get them to Ben and we can answer them, further.
Council members, do you have any questions? I have a question if nobody else does. And I appreciate really this presentation and the updates and really the participation by the police officers and the department. I really do appreciate it and thankful for it. I do have a question, and you did put this on that last slide, that, and maybe it's more of just like helping me understand, that while it says the audit indicated that officers activated their cameras properly 92% of the time. First it should be 100, but I get it. But it also says they only noted activation 47% of the time as required, and interrupted video within policy only 43% of the time. Can
Yes.
somebody explain those numbers to me a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So that was actually one of the reasons that Lieutenant Kreider and myself worked with our MDT vendor, our mobile data terminal vendors, to get that button, because the way that officers were supposed to note that was in various places. So if they wrote a report, it was in the text of the report. If they didn't write a report, it would be in the notes of dispatch. So to try to find those again, to do a comprehensive report over a long time period, was very difficult to track those or find those. And then there's also difficulty because typically when officers go on a call, only one of them writes a report. So that officer was documenting it. The other officer wasn't thinking, because they typically don't have to write a report. So they didn't even think that, oh, I've got to write a report just to document that I had my body-worn camera. So with that new button now, everybody that's on the call can just do a click and one little comment if needed, and they're done. And so that we're confident that our officers are doing what we're asking of them. It's just training and not having the right tools there to make it easily be done for them.
I appreciate that explanation. So that 47 and 43% weren't about wearing it or having it on appropriately or turning it on. It was about the reporting part of it.
Correct. Yeah, it was just the one line that they needed to put in there. I activated my body-worn camera. That was the one piece.
Awesome. Okay. I mean, that was the only confusion I had, because I didn't understand that in the staff report. Council members, any other questions? All right. Thank you all so much. Axon representatives, thank you for being here. And Sergeant and Captain, thank you for being here. Chief, as always, thank you for being here. Appreciate the update a lot and taking the time to put the presentation together.
Thank you.
Council members, I know that we're so close to being done, but I am going to call an audible and do a quick 5-minute break. I know that our next item is the Central Wasatch Commission update, and we are 4 minutes behind, but that's okay. I know also that Ralph may have been having some trouble getting on. Jen, do we have a status update?
I think we may have resolved technical difficulties. So we'll see when he pops on. Hopefully it worked. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Hi, Mayor Becker.
Hi, Mayor Becker.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mayor. And I hope that we got any technical issues resolved. It is always interesting when we're on Zoom or WebEx, whatever we're on. But thank you so much for joining us. Council and public, we are now going to hear an update from the Central Wasatch Commission. First, we have Sam Owen with our council staff, former Mayor Ralph Becker, who's the executive director of the CWC. And I think that's all that we have presenting today. So I'm going to turn the time over to Sam, and then we will turn the time over to you, Mayor Becker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Central Wasatch Commission is an interlocal agency charged with implementing the Mountain Accord, which is a collaborative public engagement heavy document that outlined some future plans and roadmaps for preservation and healthy recreation in the Central Wasatch Canyons. The Central Wasatch Commission is comprised of member communities like Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, Mill Creek, Park City, Summit County. I'm not going to be able to list them all, Director Becker, but many of those agencies, and is created through the legislative action of the municipal councils whose cities are involved with the interlocal. Salt Lake City contributes out of the water utility budget every year to the Central Wasatch Commission. The commission is sustained through these membership dues that are contributed by all the member cities annually. And that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd turn it over to Director Becker to hear more.
Thank you, Chair, City Council members, and others. It's a pleasure to see you. It's been a while in many cases, and it's all still virtual. So sorry we can't do this live and face-to-face, but hopefully that time will come for you and for the rest of us soon. I'm going to just run through quickly. We haven't had a chance to visit with you really for quite a while. In fact, there's been a turnover in some of the members of the council since we've been with you directly. I know that Laura Briefer, Mayor Mendenhall, of course, as a member, have been keeping you abreast of things. But earlier in the year, I talked about updating you directly, trying to answer questions, and obviously receive any input that you want to give to us. So, Sam, I'm not sure if you or someone else is going to be controlling the slideshow, but if we could maybe get that up in a screen share, and then all I can see is the slideshow. So I'm just going to kind of walk through this very quickly, and then we could just go back through anything that you want to spend more time on. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide there. Quickly, just on Mountain Accord, and I'm not going to review these slides fully at all. But as was mentioned, Mountain Accord emerged really from the specific proposal for ski link. We still see stop ski link signs around the city, and brought together really all of the public and private interests. It was really spearheaded by Salt Lake City and other local leaders. And over 2 years, we worked through the toughest issues that had plagued the Wasatch literally for decades to see if we could arrive at a locally driven agreement by consensus of what needed to happen to protect the Wasatch going forward and to solve some of these issues that had been really getting worse and worse over time. That agreement was signed in July of 2015 by every jurisdiction, all the jurisdictional leaderships, by state leadership, and all the private interests from the ski resorts to the conservation groups. Next slide, if we could. And it really represented the guide path as well that led to the creation of the Central Wasatch Commission. One of the things that was realized by everybody was that we have over 20 jurisdictions with responsibilities in the Wasatch, and issues that it's tough for the local private interest, profit and nonprofit, to agree on, and that creating a forum, a governmental forum that was locally driven, as was Mountain Accord, would be valuable. So the Central Wasatch Commission emerged out of that. If you could move on to the next one, and it happened by interlocal agreement, as was referenced, and it is a unique effort, as near as I can tell, anywhere in the country, in that we tend to focus on public lands issues and some issues that are intergovernmental. It is done entirely cooperative. It is done and through consensus, and it is done at the local level. It is led by the local elected officials, including, of course, the mayor of Salt Lake City. And that the Central Wasatch Commission, CWC, has operated by consensus really from its start, really drawing on the Mountain Accord days. And we'll talk a little bit about more some of those specific issues. Maybe the next slide there. Here are the members. It's really all of the local jurisdictions in and adjacent to the Central Wasatch Mountains, front and back. So some counting Park City in the back, and then of course all of these other ones. It also includes and it's the elected officials themselves, the mayors for the most part. We have one ex officio member, and that's UTA. They're not obviously an elected body. So Carlton Christensen, the chair of their board, serves on CWC in an ex officio non-voting capacity. Next slide, please. We also have an advisory council, which are all of trying to get all of sort of the major sort of private interests and members of the public who have been particularly active in the Central Wasatch Mountains. So it includes the conservation groups and ski resorts, some of the recreation interest leadership, the community councils in the mountains, and then a number of private citizens, and then some folks who specifically focus, in their advocacy on transportation. That 35-member council has been active now for 3.5 years and serves as in an advisory capacity to the board and meets on a very regular basis. Maybe next slide. So this is, again, just how the commission kind of operates, and we talked a little bit about that, really as kind of a convener and attempting to resolve resolution and seek cooperation, and really also assist the state in some of these big issues the state's now heavily involved in. Next slide. Because it's really at the forefront of attention, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the transportation issue, which is kind of front and center right now. The Central Wasatch Commission worked intensively, and I mean the board members, the stakeholders, groups, to try to arrive at a consensus approach for how to deal with these increasingly troubling transportation issues in the mountains. They were unable to arrive at a specific mode they could agree on, but they did agree on what the elements needed to be for any transportation solution. And I'm going to just go through these kind of one by one here. So if we could go to the next slide, you'll notice there's 6 of those. Visitor use capacity. One of the areas that we all know who spend time in the mountains is that we are getting overwhelmed this is basically an 80,000 acre area. If it were a national park, it would be the third most visited national park in the country, really the equivalent of Yellowstone, greater than all of the national parks in Utah. And Yellowstone is over 1 million acres. So we have this intense concentration of recreational users and people accessing our mountains. And of course, we all appreciate the beauty of it. The visitor use is in some cases kind of overwhelming what the mountains can establish. And, you know, we see that obviously, particularly with Salt Lake City's priority interest in watershed protection, but it's also threatens in many instances probably the visitor experience. And so the Forest Service, which is responsible for recreation management, or takes the lead on that certainly in the mountains, they have a very well-established system, but they have not looked in detail at visitor use. And those of you who use the mountains a lot know they've also not really managed that use in any way to try to manage visitors and the experiences they have. They really feel like they have sufficient infrastructure. The Central Wasatch Commission really from its beginning said, we've got to get a handle on this. And so that's one of the areas that relating to increasing capacity of the transportation system that the CWC is focusing attention on. We've got a visitor use study going on now that'll be completed over the next year or so that we hope will contribute to giving information that'll help provide for better visitor management going forward. Next slide. A second key pillar, as they're all called, is watershed protection. And all of you, of course, are not only intimately familiar with, but realize Salt Lake City is the lead. There's great deference, I'd say, fortunately, given to Salt Lake City and to managing that water supply and providing for management that does not jeopardize the quality or quantity of that water going forward. But it is an ongoing battle, and I know you all have dealt with that to varying degrees, and it's been going on for well over a century now in terms of Salt Lake City's active participation there. But we wanted to make sure that was a key and priority element in any transportation decisions. So that's the reason you see CWC highlight this. I think there's a real concern that that is not giving sufficient deference by the state through UDOT's environmental impact statement it's doing right now. Next slide. Traffic management, parking and bus or other transit strategies. Some of the short-term and immediate strategies that don't involve a great investment, the CWC feels needs to be given a lot of attention. That some of these shorter-term strategies in combination, whether that's tolling, whether that's better parking management, or whether it's improving the existing bus service, all of those kinds of things and many more can make it a difference. Whether it's a big enough difference is a big question mark, but certainly a difference in relieving some of the congestion and the problems that we have in the canyons, and we hope those will be implemented immediately, regardless of these big investment decisions that are going to take a long time to implement. So that was a key element as well. Next slide, please. Integrating into the broader regional transportation network. UDOT in its environmental impact statement is focused on State Highway 210, which is basically Wasatch Boulevard and Little Cottonwood Canyon Road. While that certainly is a critical piece in solving mountain transportation system matters, if it is not considered in the context of, and in fact addresses really the larger transportation and transit network, a concern of the Central Wasatch Commission is that we will not be making good long-term decisions and not be making necessarily the best investments. So looking, for example, not just at the mouths of these canyons and huge parking garages, but also at how do you tie into the bus system, or what's the best way to tie into the Valley Transit system And looking longer term at Big Cottonwood Canyon, which is not part of the EIS, Mill Creek, and the connection to the Wasatch Back needs to all be part of the decision making so that a major investment decision made in Little Cottonwood Canyon would mesh well with a broader decision. So that's been a key pillar for the Central Wasatch Commission in its recommendations to UDOT and others. Next slide, please. And having year-round service. UDOT is very focused on relieving peak time conditions and reducing traffic vehicular use by 30% is sort of what they've established as an objective. But I think all of us who use these mountains know that this is not just a peak winter condition problem or challenge to address. It's giving people ways to get up in these mountains and relieve increasingly problems that are year-round. And in Big Cottonwood Canyon for some time, and we've seen, I think this actually changed to be true even in Little Cottonwood Canyon, there is more use in the summer now than there is in the winter. And so having year-round transit service, not just service to reduce peak time problems, we think needs to be part of whatever solution is arrived at. Next slide, please. And then this is something that was one of, I'd say, the two big emerging big efforts that the Mountain Accord Agreement everybody agreed to, which is to pass federal legislation to add to the existing federal designations and provide better long-term protection. It got very specific in Mountain Accord to create what is now known as the Central Wasatch National Conservation and Recreation Area, and have additional wilderness, and have a watershed protection area for White Pine Canyon, which would be a little kind of a wilderness light concept, recognizing some existing mechanized and motorized uses up there. That needs to be done in parallel with and as soon as possible. So it's done in conjunction with any transportation improvements that would increase people's access into the mountains. The legislation, by the way, and Salt Lake City, particularly with Laura Briefer's work, has been involved in developing legislation. We actually have a draft that's a consensus draft for legislation, and have asked our delegation to introduce it, but you all know as well as I do the reluctance of our delegation to consider any public lands protection, including when it's a locally driven effort, as we're seeing here with the Central Wasatch. So there's a bill that's basically ready to go, but we don't have a receptive sponsor in the congressional delegation right now. So, and they want to see solutions, rightfully so, on the transportation issues, knowing that those are going forward, so those don't get lost in the shuffle of some greater protection. With that, that's kind of the pillars. Maybe the next slide, we can just, I can just wrap this up really quickly. The commission has been committed to consensus, and that in 95+% of the time means unanimous decisions in the case of the commission. And it's a reason you haven't seen them settle around a mode, because of disagreements about what mode would best serve the Wasatch, the Central Wasatch Mountains. But they work very hard to consider large and small local government concerns and issues, as well as the issues on all sides of the equation, and arriving at solutions and working on a variety of things to help the Central Wasatch. I think that's it. Next slide. All right, that's it. No, thank you. Thank you. I'll take a little more time, I think, than I was planning, but I'm happy to answer questions or try to get you any information that I can to be helpful.
Thank you, Mayor Becker. I can't not call you Mayor Becker. I'm trying to move into Director Becker, but it just rolls off the tongue. council members, any questions? I see Director Briefer is here and obviously our Madam Mayor is here. Any questions for any one of them? I do have a question just in regards to our congressional delegation, which clearly I know that it's got to be frustrating to have put in all of this work, and I know the passion that Director Briefer and you, Mayor Becker, have for this, and then not have a receptor. Is there anything we can do? I'm sure that we've offered up our federal lobbyists to help with this, but is there any sort of thing that the council or any resources that connections that we may have that could help push that initiative along a little bit?
Yeah, I'll invite Laura Briefer and Mayor Mendenhall to comment on this as well. But actually, thank you for that. And I will say that a bill was actually introduced in 2016 by Congressman Chaffetz. So that's a long time ago, right? But it was at the end of a Congress. The bill had not been refined. When the commission got formed, it was really the first task I was assigned. It was the last 6 months of a 2-year Congress. And so I worked feverishly with a lot of people to get a bill together. We actually got close to an introduction even then, but we weren't going to get a bill passed. Since then, I think it's just been very difficult. And I wouldn't say in every instance there's been opposition. In fact, this is in Congressman Curtis's district, and he's shown a great interest in this. His family is, as you all probably know, from Salt Lake, and he spent time up in Big Cottonwood Canyon growing up. They had family property up there, and you know, he gets the issue, but he doesn't have a lot of, I'll say, support within the delegation. You are all elected officials, and you know that elected officials respond often better to other elected officials. Mayor Mendenhall and Laura Briefer, I'm sure, have both been passing along their desire to see our delegation take the bill up. But I would encourage you in working with Mayor Mendenhall and Laura, and if you want with me, to bring that to their attention. And you know, they talk about they want locally driven public lands decision making. Well, this is as locally driven and consensus as anything they will ever find. Doesn't mean there's unanimity. There are people who just don't want to see public lands protection or want something from their property that no one is going to give them, right? But you know, the ski resort support it, the conservation group support it, and all the elected officials locally support it. And by all the elected officials, I mean jurisdictions. There may be some individual exceptions, but I think, you know, keeping that that desire expressed to the congressional delegation can only help. And I'd say also helping to address some of these transportation issues that I know aren't within Salt Lake City's bailiwick, his jurisdiction, but if we don't find a solution there, not only is it harmful to all of the community and users who access the mountains, but our delegation is fearful that if they were to run legislation, at least this is what they tell us, that then there wouldn't be the support for also finding a transportation solution. And and I will tell you, Len Simon and Simon and Associates and Jen Cavino have been great, and they are ready to go to be helpful. I mean, you're DC lobbyist there.
Yeah, Jen's wonderful, so that's great. Director Briefer or Madam Mayor, did you have any thoughts on what we can do? I'd love to work with the administration if we need to pen a letter or something along those lines, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's been great working with Mayor Becker and the CWC staff. Laura's long tenure on this subject from Her time at Alta and probably even prior to that, through all of the years she's been with Public Utilities here, is just invaluable to Salt Lake City. And I am really grateful for her guidance on a lot of the complex issues that are basically all historically situated in relationship and in complexity. So Mayor Becker and Laura Briefer are really great advocates for Salt Lake City, but mostly the protection of these precious resources. And thanks for the offer to pen a letter together, and we will take you up on that when the time is right for us to send that message to Congress and to our representatives there. And we can coordinate, I hope, on our future delegation visits, maybe later this winter if those end up happening.
Great. Well, please do keep us apprised, and I know that it is important to me, and I feel like I can speak for the rest of the council members, but important to them as well. I don't mean to speak for you council members, but I just know that we've all been fighting to protect this area since I've known everyone that's on the council at this point. So anything we can do, happy to help, and really appreciate you being here, Mayor Becker, and for your work on this. Same to you, Director Briefer. I gave you a shout out yesterday because I would not know things about water if I didn't know you. And I'm so grateful for that. So thank you. Any other comments or questions, council members? Great. Well, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, good luck, you all. I know many challenging issues, and they'll all work themselves out, and you'll be.
I mean, there's nothing really going on around here.
I know. Well, I noticed that you got another sleepy item on your agenda later, so good luck with that.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care, y'all.
Council members, before we take a dinner break, I did skip over an agenda item, a very important agenda item, and I apologize for that. As you all know, sometimes I scroll too quickly through my agenda. So I'd like to turn back, excuse me, to agenda item number 4, which is the naming of the new Arboretum in Salt Lake City Cemetery as the Mark Smith Memorial Arboretum. And for this, we do have Brian Fulmer with our council staff, Kristen Riker, the Director of Public Lands, and Tony, I don't know how to say your last name. Glyat? I'm gonna guess. Urban Forestry Division Director, I apologize. So I'm going to first turn it over to Brian. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a proposal from the administration to name the new arboretum of 50 trees in the Salt Lake City Cemetery the Mark Smith Memorial Arboretum to recognize the long-term city cemetery sexton. I'll turn it over to Kristen and Tony, who can provide more information and answer any questions council members may have.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so we are really excited to move forward on the Arboretum and naming the Arboretum the Mark Smith Memorial Arboretum in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. As most of you know, Mark Smith served as a cemetery sexton for 20 years. He was the longest standing sexton that the city has had. And the cemetery was really his greatest passion. He loved the cemetery. He loved the people he worked with and the people who visited the cemetery there. He was like a constant presence in the cemetery. I was privileged to know Mark for 4 years, and I think everybody I've talked to about Mark has said that they have like little things that Mark said that they kind of remember him by. And one of the things that I remember Mark by is he used to always say, Kristen, you know, the cemetery is for the living. It's, you know, it's a public record for all of us who are still living and come visit and to know the stories of the past and how they shaped our community and our society, and they made us who we are today. And I always remember him, you know, kind of, it was almost a lecture, you know, it's for the people who are living and we got to make it great for them. And he was so passionate. You know, he stuck to his principles, always fighting for the cemetery. We had many discussions about the cemetery and funding, and he was just an amazing person. I think he's just one of those people that made us all feel like we were his special friend. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. We miss him greatly. We're really excited to have an Arboretum Unveiling event on Saturday, November 6th at 10 a.m. With the naming of the Arboretum as the Mark Smith Memorial Arboretum at the Salt Lake City Cemetery. So I don't have more to add. I don't know if Tony or I know Keith Van Otten, our current sexton, is on. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add. I just kind of wanted to share some thoughts and remember Mark.
Yeah, Kristen, I'll add just a little bit. First of all, Amy, you nailed the name, Goliath. So good job on that. It's rare. Mark introduced me to the trees of the Arboretum my first week on the job, some 7 or so years ago. And him and I talked a number of times about the potential for there to be an Arboretum on the cemetery site. And it was something he was very passionate about. So this coming together at this time, it really, it's meaningful to the Urban Forestry Division. It's meaningful to his family. And I can't think of a better name for this collection of trees than the Mark Smith Memorial Arboretum. And I can't think of a better place for the city's first official arboretum than the cemetery property, where you can literally look out over this entire urban forest that we have here and really get a sense of the connection between trees and people. So we're excited about this.
Thank you both so much. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I also had the opportunity to meet and work with Mark a little bit before he retired and then passed away. And he's one of the people that co-authored the book about the city cemetery and knew a lot of the really fascinating stories of the people that are buried there and some of the urban legends as well. And I really appreciate all of the work that he did for this really important and special part of the city. And I think this is a great way to honor his memory, and I'll be really excited to be at that event. So thank you for doing all the work to put this together, Tony and Kristen. And I hope other people will come to the event as well.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else? Comments? Yes, Dennis?
I'd like to say something, Madam Chair. Just really want to echo Councilmember Wharton's feelings and Director Reicher's too. Having started working with Mark, in 2012 as a founding member of the Peanut Board, being there for many years, it was his passion and dedication for the cemetery, and everything in it was just astounding. It shone through with, he had such pleasure every day. So definitely miss him and look forward to the event.
Great, thank you. Council members, anything else? Well, I I'm excited for this. I'm excited for the event, and I think it really is an appropriate and wonderful tribute to somebody. I have never loved cemeteries just because it's me, but now I have a totally new outlook on why I should love them and appreciate them. So I look forward to the opening, and thank you all for being here today. We will be doing a vote on this, by the way, on October 19th, just a FYI. Okay, council members, we have made it to dinner break. So,
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Unless I missed something.
It's Cindy. I'm not sure, but I think that it was determined that you don't need to do a vote on the Arboretum. It was more of an informational, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. That's correct. And we didn't have a chance to amend the agenda once
Yes.
we realized that.
Sorry
So that's
about
why there's the action on the agenda, but it's not needed.
Thank you.
Great.
Sorry.
Then I think we can all just show our thumbs up feelings on the new naming of the Arboretum, even though we don't need it. All right. Thank you, council members, Madam Mayor, staff. We'll take a quick dinner break and be back here at 6:40. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome to Capital City News, your source for staying informed and engaged with Salt Lake City government. I'm your host, Brian Young, reporting in from Library Square. Our interview today is with Sophia Nicholas, the Deputy Director of Salt Lake City Sustainability Department. And since Halloween season's in full swing, our History Minute is about the cult slasher film Silent Night, Deadly Night. But before the fun begins, it's time for our legislative update. Then we'll take a look back and a look ahead.
At its September 21st meeting, the City Council received an update from Police Chief Brown about vacancies in the police department, received an update on the city's equity study, and received updates about other issues in the city, including on the COVID-19 pandemic, homelessness, and issues about racial equity in policing. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council. Thanks to the voter-approved Funding Our Future bond, the city has been able to launch a new Alleyway Rejuvenation project. This will allow the city to improve and reimagine some of these important spaces in the city. The $200,000 pilot project began with an alleyway in Liberty Wells, and more alleys will be identified over the course of the project. Last month, the new SLC airport celebrated its first year of operation in the first phase of the new terminal system. A celebration was held to commemorate the anniversary, and an award for the airport's sustainability was bestowed to those present.
Mayor Mendenhall announced a continuation of the pause of new trail construction in our foothills system in order to work with environmental consultants to ensure those considerations are made as we build new trails. Salt Lake City is still experiencing a significant drought. Do what you can to reduce your own water usage, and don't hesitate to reach out to Salt Lake City and report issues of water overusage. With your help, we'll be able to make water a lasting commodity for our community. Learn more about water conservation at slc.gov/utilities/conservation. The Centers for Disease Control have announced new guidelines for vaccine boosters. Everyone should get vaccinated, but if you've received the Pfizer vaccine and are within certain groups, you should look to receive your third dose if you're 6 months past your second dose. These include folks over the age of 65 years old and long-term care residents, folks 18 to 64 with underlying medical conditions, and anyone who works in an environment that has an increased exposure to COVID. But most importantly, get your first dose. For information on where to get your vaccine, visit the county vaccination website.
Road construction continues in Salt Lake City, and for our update this week, we're going to take a look at the 300 West Beautification Project, as well as our work improving bus shelters across the city.
Construction has started on 300 West in the area from North Temple to 1000 North. This SLC redevelopment agency project is in the second phase for the area and will add curb extensions at 7 intersections and 1 crossing near West High School, pedestrian crossing signals at 400 North and Reed Avenue, and a new park strip and other landscaping improvements to the north near Warm Springs Park. The project will also include Utah Transit Authority planned bus stop relocations and improvements that will greatly increase comfort and accessibility for transit users. Learn more at www.slc.gov/mystreet. Salt Lake City, also in partnership with UTA, is making improvements to other bus stops across the city. The purpose of the improvements is to make the bus stops accessible to all riders. Improvements will vary by stop, but may include the addition of shelters, benches, trash cans, bike racks, and lighting. Along with stop improvements, there may also be some stop consolidation to improve the efficiency of the bus routes. Some of the improved bus stops will also serve new routes in the coming years. This work has started on South Temple. Learn more at www.slc.gov/transit.
To keep up with these and other funding our future bond projects in Salt Lake City, make sure you visit slc.gov/bondmap. And our interview is with Sophia Nicholas, Salt Lake City's Deputy Director of the Sustainability Department.
Yeah, so we just had the 5th annual Utah Climate Week. Salt Lake City is one of the original founders of Climate Week, and it's fantastic that we've now made it to 5 years of hosting this incredible event. This year we had 50 organizations and 20 events all across Utah, really calling attention to the ways that climate is uniquely impacting our state, as well as all of the many ways that we're taking action to help tackle the crisis. So in particular with Salt Lake City, what we're seeing with climate change, with the predictions, and I feel like especially this year we've really felt it a lot more than in previous years, but we are definitely seeing drought, lower rainfall, less snowpack. When we do get rain, it's coming in those intense storms that are challenging for our infrastructure. We're also seeing a lot more air pollution in the summer, so we're seeing that high ozone, that wildfire smoke from across the region. We're also experiencing just heat, and that's a big problem for a lot of people in our community who are either working outside, spending more time outside, or have other ailments that make the heat really challenging. So these are all of the reasons that Salt Lake City is taking action on climate. As a local government, we are the first responder when it comes to all sorts of things, but that doesn't change with climate change. And so this is why we're calling attention to the problem and why we're doing so much within our local communities and within local government to try to make a difference. Salt Lake City is working on climate change on a number of different fronts. The biggest is really with our community renewable energy program. We're working in the next few years to transition to net 100% clean electricity for our entire community, which is very exciting. We're also working on the transportation front to help people get out of cars, to walk more, drive less. We're planting trees, and we're doing all sorts of things to really reduce emissions, both from our municipal government and to help the community as a whole do that. Please visit our website at slcgreen.com, and you can learn more about the Utah Climate Action Network at utahclimatenetwork.com.
It's time again for the History Minute. Silent Night, Deadly Night was filmed in Salt Lake City and other parts around Utah in the winter of 1983. Filming under the title Sleigh Ride, it shot for a budget of about $750,000. In the early 80s, slasher films could be made quick and cheap and sold to big-name distribution houses for small releases on screen and huge video sales and rentals to be the next cult horror flick. This Yuletide Slasher filmed around the city, most notably casting Westminster College as a mental asylum. The film followed a department store Santa Claus who'd witnessed his own parents murdered by a Santa as a child. After a lifetime of growing up in an orphanage and finding himself dressed as their killers, he snaps, taking Santa Claus on a killing spree. The film would have probably never made a dent in the public consciousness if it hadn't been boycotted and deemed offensive by organizations like the Catholic Conference. Parents picketed the film for casting a beloved character like Santa Claus as an axe murderer. Even the poster scared children. The film was released the same weekend as the original Nightmare on Elm Street film and beat it at the box office. Unfortunately, because of the controversy, it was pulled from theaters and only became a cult hit in subsequent video releases. That's it for another episode of Capital City News. Remember, the best way to stay informed is to stay engaged. You can do that by following us on social media at SLC.gov, subscribing to us on YouTube, and watching us on Channel 17. So, reporting in from Library Square, until next week, I'm Brian Young. Welcome to Capital City News, your source for staying informed and engaged with Salt Lake City government. I'm your host, Brian Young, reporting in from Library Square. Our interview today is with Sophia Nicholas, the Deputy Director of Salt Lake City's Sustainability Department. And since Halloween season's in full swing, our History Minute is about the cult slasher film Silent Night, Deadly Night. But before the fun begins, it's time for our legislative update. Then we'll take a look back and a look ahead.
At its September 21st meeting, the City Council received an update from Police Chief Brown about vacancies in the police department, received an update on the city's equity study, and received updates about other issues in the city, including on the COVID-19 pandemic, homelessness, and issues about racial equity in policing. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council. Thanks to the voter-approved Funding Our Future bond, the city has been able to launch a new Alleyway Rejuvenation project. This will allow the city to improve and reimagine some of these important spaces in the city. The $200,000 pilot project began with an alleyway in Liberty Wells, and more alleys will be identified over the course of the project. Last month, the new SLC Airport celebrated its first year of operation in the first phase of the new terminal system. A celebration was held to commemorate the anniversary, and an award for the airport's sustainability was bestowed to those present. Mayor Mendenhall announced a continuation of the pause of new trail construction in our foothills system in order to work with environmental consultants to ensure those considerations are made as we build new trails. Salt Lake City is still experiencing a significant drought. Do what you can to reduce your own water usage, and don't hesitate to reach out to Salt Lake City and report issues of water overusage. With your help, we'll be able to make water a lasting commodity for our community. Learn more about water conservation at slc.gov/utilities/conservation. The Centers for Disease Control have announced new guidelines for vaccine boosters. Everyone should get vaccinated, But if you've received the Pfizer vaccine and are within certain groups, you should look to receive your third dose if you're 6 months past your second dose. These include folks over the age of 65 years old and long-term care residents, folks 18 to 64 with underlying medical conditions, and anyone who works in an environment that has an increased exposure to COVID. But most importantly, get your first dose. For information on where to get your vaccine, visit the county vaccination website.
Road construction continues in Salt Lake City, and for our update this week, we're going to take a look at the 300 West Beautification Project, as well as our work improving bus shelters across the city.
Construction has started on 300 West in the area from North Temple to 1000 North. This SLC redevelopment agency project is in the second phase for the area and will add curb extensions at 7 intersections and 1 crossing near West High School, pedestrian crossing signals at 400 North and Reed Avenue, and a new park strip and other landscaping improvements to the north near Warm Springs Park. The project will also include Utah Transit Authority planned bus stop relocations and improvements that will greatly increase comfort and accessibility for transit users. Learn more at www.slc.gov/mystreet. Salt Lake City, also in partnership with UTA, is making improvements to other bus stops across the city. The purpose of the improvements is to make the bus stops accessible to all riders. Improvements will vary by stop, but may include the addition of shelters, benches, trash cans, bike racks, and lighting. Along with stop improvements, there may also be some stop consolidation to improve the efficiency of the bus routes. Some of the improved bus stops will also serve new routes in the coming years. This work has started on South Temple. Learn more at www.slc.gov/transit.
To keep up with these and other Funding Our Future bond projects in Salt Lake City, make sure you visit slc.gov/bondmap. And our interview is with Sophia Nicholas, Salt Lake City's Deputy Director of the Sustainability Department.
Yeah, so we just had the 5th annual Utah Climate Week. Salt Lake City is one of the original founders of Climate Week, and it's fantastic that we've now made it to 5 years of hosting this incredible event. This year we had 50 organizations and 20 events all across Utah, really calling attention to the ways that climate is uniquely impacting our state, as well as all of the many ways that we're taking action to help tackle the crisis. So in particular with Salt Lake City, what we're seeing with climate change, with the predictions, and I feel like especially this year we've really felt it a lot more than in previous years, but we are definitely seeing drought, lower rainfall, less snowpack. When we do get rain, it's coming in those intense storms that are challenging for our infrastructure. We're also seeing a lot more air pollution in the summer, so we're seeing that high ozone, that wildfire smoke from across the region. We're also experiencing just heat, and that's a big problem for a lot of people in our community who are either working outside, spending more time outside, or have other ailments that make the heat really challenging. So these are all of the reasons that Salt Lake City is taking action on climate. As a local government, we are the first responder when it comes to all sorts of things, but that doesn't change with climate change. And so this is why we're calling attention to the problem and why we're doing so much within our local communities and within local government to try to make a difference. Salt Lake City is working on climate change on a number of different fronts. The biggest is really with our community renewable energy program. We're working in the next few years to transition to net 100% clean electricity for our entire community, which is very exciting. We're also working on the transportation front to help people get out of cars, to walk more, drive less. We're planting trees, and we're doing all sorts of things to really reduce emissions, both from our municipal government and to help the community as a whole do that. Please visit our website at slcgreen.com, and you can learn more about the Utah Climate Action Network at utahclimatenetwork.com.
It's time again for the History Minute. Silent Night, Deadly Night was filmed in Salt Lake City and other parts around Utah in the winter of 1983. Filming under the title Sleigh Ride, it shot for a budget of about $750,000. In the early 80s, slasher films could be made quick and cheap and sold to big-name distribution houses for small releases on screen and huge video sales and rentals to be the next cult horror flick. This Yuletide Slasher filmed around the city, most notably casting Westminster College as a mental asylum. The film followed a department store Santa Claus who'd witnessed his own parents murdered by a Santa as a child. After a lifetime of growing up in an orphanage and finding himself dressed as their killers, he snaps, taking Santa Claus on a killing spree. The film would have probably never made a dent in the public consciousness if it hadn't been boycotted and deemed offensive by organizations like the Catholic Conference. Parents picketed the film for casting a beloved character like Santa Claus as an axe murderer. Even the poster scared children. The film was released the same weekend as the original Nightmare on Elm Street film and beat it at the box office. Unfortunately, because of the controversy, it was pulled from theaters and only became a cult hit in subsequent video releases. That's it for another episode of Capital City News. Remember, the best way to stay informed is to stay engaged. You can do that by following us on social media at SLC.gov, subscribing to us on YouTube, and watching us on Channel 17. So, reporting in from Library Square, until next week, I'm Brian Young.
The prize for being the most punctual. So merit badge goes to you. Congratulations. Folks, we are back. Thank you for allowing us to have a short little break and hopefully everybody got a little bit of food. We are on agenda item number 7, which is a briefing on a public benefits analysis and recommendation regarding the digital donation program. Today we have with us Jennifer Bruno, our Council Deputy Director, Aaron Bentley, the Chief Information Officer. I also see Noel here, and that's where we're at. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
Madam Chair, I'll just briefly give an overview of the council's role in this process and then turn it over to the administration to discuss the program specifically. When the city is considering donating a city asset or financial assistance to a private entity, state code actually governs that and requires that the city go through a public process. In the event that we're donating to a private business, the city has to go through an actual analysis to determine that there's a public benefit to that donation and also have a public hearing about that analysis. In the case of a nonprofit, which is the case here, the city is only required to have a public hearing, although I want to note that the administration has nonetheless provided an analysis of the public benefit for this proposal. So that's the process we have here. And at this point, I'll turn it over to the administration. If we could get some indication of council support, that will help staff determine when and how fast we can schedule that public hearing. So I'll turn it over to Noel and Aaron. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Council, for this opportunity to talk about our digital donation. About a year ago, I looked it up, September 2020, we adopted the digital equity policy. And since that time, we've been just sort of pecking away at ideas on how we might best implement that. And one of the policy objectives is to provide access to quality devices for those who need that. Speaking with Aaron Bentley, and when we made this move over to IMS, we learned that the city moves hundreds of good computers to auction each year, and our analysis shows that we take a small loss for auctioning those off, and they end up going to eBay or some other sort of reseller typically. So we wanted to start a pilot project and a program to see if we can't start channeling that equipment to those in our community that need that. And that's what this public benefits resolution is about, is a small pilot working with the folks at the Sorensen Youth and Family to get the surplus equipment that they have into the hands of some of their clients and some of their partners there. And we want to take a moment as we do this to take some notes about how we do this, what are the lessons that learn, what does the community need, and how we may be able to build stronger, more consistent relationships with the community in doing that. An ideal would be that we come back to you on a regular basis with a more informed understanding of what it is that we can do, and that we're very specific and strategic in how we get this equipment into the hands of those in our community that need it the most. And so that's what we're here today for. It's a public benefits analysis, a resolution that would allow us to donate 18 Mac computers to some clients at the Sorensen that work with our youth and family crews, people that need them. We will work with those members of the community to make sure that they have the infrastructure at home that they need to be successful in this, and that's going to be a part of our analysis and the work that we do. And hopefully when we're done with this small pilot, we'll have some lessons learned, and we'll take it up a notch and try again, and we'll keep trying until we feel like we've got a really solid proposal that can turn into a more formal program maybe at one point in time. I think that's about what I have to say.
Thanks, Noel. Do council members, do you have questions or comments?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes. Yes, sir.
So, this is great. I think anything the city can do to partner in bridging the digital divide is a good idea. Sorensen Youth and Family Center, I thought that was a city-owned facility. So are we donating it to ourselves, or is there a nonprofit that operates out of there? Can you help me understand all the?
We're donating it directly to community members in this instance. But we also work with some community partners there. And so we're looking at possibly one of the nonprofit community partners that we have in that community, having some of the equipment go to them so that they can go through their clients. That's something that we're very interested in, right? One of the models that we're looking at is how do we form a relationship with the nonprofit organizations in the community so that we are not the middleman, so to speak, I guess. I don't know how else to say it, but we can start targeting broader. And that's one of the things that we want to learn as, what does that relationship look like? What do we need to have in that relationship for it to be successful?
Okay, great, thanks.
Mhm.
Excuse me, any other comments? I have a question. Oh, sorry, Dan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is this gonna be quarterly? Is it just gonna be every year, or you still not sure exactly how this rolls out?
We don't know yet. I think that's going to be what we've come back with a recommendation. I would like to see us put it on a predictable, to put it in some sort of a predictable time, right? Biannual or quarterly. I think it's going to be depending on, you know, how we have our equipment and what that. I don't think the city can hand out 100 every quarter, right? That's why we have to form some relationships. And I think that's going to inform us is, you know, now we go forward and start looking at building those relationships a little bit after we run this quick pilot.
Other questions? I have a question in our in the transmittal. It says that we end up with 300 to 500 surplus computers a year.
Mhm.
Why?
Well, I guess maybe Aaron can say that, but we have thousands and thousands of computers in circulation in the city, and we're on a 3-year cycle with our. I'm making up the 3. It might be a 4-year cycle. We're on a cycle with how we turn over that equipment, and that's what it is, right? And we acquire really high quality equipment, and so when we you know, undo the personal information on there and we reboot it to be a new computer, it's still a good quality computer. Aaron can, if I misstated that.
Yeah, let me just speak to that a little. So a desktop computer we traditionally keep for 4 years. They come with a 3-year warranty, and then we kind of get the next extra year of life. And then a laptop is 3 years. And as Noel mentioned, for the class of work that we need those for, that's about the life of for business class. But for consumer class and what you need for a student, these will go, especially a Mac. This will go for another 2 or 3, 4 years for them, and continue to serve them for what they need.
So can I ask why in a pilot program, if we have that many surplus, we're only donating how many? 12?
18?
18, sorry.
Well, I think it's we've got that first group of we've kind of got a little bit of a pilot ironed out with the folks at the Sorensen, and we hope to turn this around quickly. I would love it if in a couple months we're sitting here again asking the same question but with a little bit more information, and then we just keep iterating.
And did the community members that were selected, I presume there's some criteria. Did the Sorensen Center sort of decide what criteria that was? I'm certainly not against this.
We
at all.
haven't formalized
asking the
a
question.
serious criteria yet. You know, during COVID, the youth and family has reinvented themselves, right, in how they support the community and that. So we know, I would say we know people who don't have computers in their home, right? So there are people that we're currently actively supporting, kids and families that we know just because they're members of our program, that we know that they don't have a computer in their home. And so we're pretty targeted there. And that's one of the things that we thought would be really good at this first time, is just be pretty targeted versus, you know, at some point in time, you know, if we have 100 to give away or 200 to give away, you know, there may be, you know, and we're signing up and it's hard to maybe validate folks and things like that. And so those were some of the things that we maybe didn't want to get tripped up on right out of the gate. And you know, maybe, you know, I don't know what the rules are. Maybe we don't care so much in the, you know, if someone's coming to us and we know they live here and they sort of, you know, or maybe we're not going to kick that can, or maybe we get into a stronger relationship with like the refugee community or with, you know, some other folks that are, you know, being served in those various communities that need that, and they know their population. We aren't trying to set a high bar, I guess.
Again, I completely support this, just asking the questions. One other question is, hold please, I had it in my head. You mentioned making sure that they have the necessary sort of, I'm assuming, technology or means within their home to make sure that they don't just have a piece of equipment that sits there and doesn't get used, but that it's actually viable for people to use. Will we have IMS staff go and make sure, or do like a training with them, or do you know what that looks like yet?
Yeah, we've got staff through the Sorensen and through the computer lab, and that's why we're kind of wanting to do it through them, because they have that. Also, the library just published an article on sorry, my daughter brought me some dinner. The library just published a workbook, a toolkit on digital navigation. They ran that digital navigator pilot this last year, and they've just published their toolkit on that. And so that's something I think that we really want to consider is, you know, what's the best model for maybe a digital navigator program. The library, it was a pilot program. They don't have digital navigators now. That was a limited fund. But there's a bunch of folks out there who've been trained to be digital navigators, so we would hate for them to go to waste. And then we'll partner with, I've been working with the United Way and some other providers to see if we can't make sure that they have a good internet connection at home as well.
Awesome. I mean, I think it's great, and maybe we can get those digital navigators to volunteer for some of these positions or something as we launch some of these programs. But I think it's great. Anna?
I have a question. No, two things. One, yes, the IRC the International Refugee Center, I think it's the C stands for, they could definitely, use the computers for folks coming, they're refugees, obviously, and the children as they start school here. So I recommend that you contact them as you guys go forward with the program. And also, I was thinking, once these computers are, somebody takes them and uses them for 2, 3, 4 years, however long it lasts, will we be able to recoup those computers for recycling, to make sure that we are recycling them, or instead of maybe them throwing it away and then not recouping some of those materials that could be recycled, or maybe we have a center, also the Sorensen Center, where people can bring them back.
At this point in time, we really haven't looked at sort of keeping an eye on them as they went forward. That may be, I think that may be a good piece of information that we do, in sort of go into a future orientation with folks around, how you do digital recycling, right? But at this point in time, we really hadn't considered that, sort of trailing them. We thought that we would do some, little surveys now and then to kind of, but it kind of just treat it as, once we got them set up, it's theirs, and then maybe we'll just do a survey. But I think that's a good add, right, to at least to the orientation about sort of responsible digital recycling, whether or not we take it back, or at least we orient them to understand what that is. That's a good point to add.
My guess is that sustainability can help with that. Like, they might know how these are recycled, where they can go, or so that's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Yeah,
Chair?
yeah, we'll put like a little postcard in with it or something.
Oh, that's a good idea, Noel. Dennis, did I see your?
Yeah. Thank you. No, I just can't. I can't support this enough. This is fantastic. When I met my wife, she was the director of the after school and summer programs there at Sorensen Center for the at-risk youth, and I've known Sean in the computer center ever since. It's fantastic. The digital divide is real, and particularly in this neighborhood. So I really appreciate this effort. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Sean's really the brains behind the operation. I'm just the guy standing here.
That's fantastic. He's been a very dedicated guy for a very long time in that space, and it's
Yep.
wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing how many more we can donate.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Jen, did you mention that we might need a straw poll for this? Would it be helpful if we had a straw poll? You're muted. You owe $1.
Sorry. I'm sensing the temperature there seems pretty positive. So you can poll if you'd like to give the administration some idea, but we'll plan on moving forward.
Council members, we're going to do a quick straw poll on showing your support of this donation. So show your feelings. That is unanimous with Councilmember Wharton not being here today and us not having another council member. So there you go. Godspeed.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Noel. Our next agenda item is, hold please, turning back to my agenda, is the resolution extending the mayor's declaration of emergency something, hold please, the local emergency declaration extension. And we have hopefully Katie Lewis here or somebody from the attorney's office or Jen. Anyone who wants to speak to this.
While other people are sort of getting online, it's pretty basic. It's just extending the mayor's declaration, the same thing the council did in September. We're thinking that it would, if you extend it for 30 days, which is on your motion sheet, it would be reconsidered next at your November 9th council meeting, but you could extend it for any number of days that you feel is appropriate. Resolution before you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cough during your talk. I thought I was muted. I owe $1 now. Are there any questions, council members, regarding this? Any discussion on this? Katie, anything to add?
I'll just add, Council Chair Fowler, that this extends the declaration of local emergency related to COVID-19, and it also extends any related emergency orders. Currently, the emergency order that the mayor has issued is the mask order for K through 12 schools. So that both become extended if it's approved by the council this evening.
Great, thank you, Katie. Dennis.
Just curious if we've gotten any measurable standards to work with from the health department on when something like this could go away.
Thanks. You know, Councilmember Ferris, my chief of staff, Rachel Otto, has been mostly leading those conversations, and she is celebrating her daughter's birthday at the moment. So she's not with us, but can we follow up with you this week? We'll get you an email about whatever the status is from the health department.
Sure, I'm definitely in favor of keeping it going as long as it's keeping our kids safe. And just want to see if we can put some science behind it too. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions?
I was going to say the same thing Dennis did.
Okay. Dan, did you have
My
something?
only question would be, do we want to extend it past 30 days or do we want to just continue with the status quo that we've been doing it every 30 days?
I think legally we can only do it for 30 days, every 30 days, can we? Or we can go longer than that. I see Katie and Jen both giving different head shakes, nods, things.
You have the authority to extend it as long as you want. The mayor's initial order can only be 30 days, but then the council has authority to pick whatever length they would prefer.
There's sort of a practical consideration, which is the the next council meeting is Tuesday. The next council meeting after that, because of the election, is November 9th. So there's not really a council meeting that's shorter than 30 days that makes sense. If you wanted to do it longer than 30 days, that's of course on the table. I want to add, like, who reminded me that Dr. Dunn is coming to speak to the council next week. At least that's the tentative plan. Hopefully nothing changes in her schedule. But that may be something to discuss with her. The council can also shorten an emergency at any point. You can convene on an emergency basis and end an emergency, that kind of thing. So you have options.
So you're telling me as council, we can just end COVID? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, Jen.
If that's what you took from what I said, I apologize.
End that emergency.
You don't have that option.
I was just hoping you were giving us more power than we had. So is there more discussion regarding continuing the emergency declaration for longer than 30 days? It sort of seems that's where Dan was, what he was suggesting. Darren, I see your
I was
hand.
suggesting, and I'm not sure when our next meeting is after Thanksgiving. Is it the Tuesday after Thanksgiving? So it's not like, I'm looking at 45 days or 60 days. And that's where I was just kind of.
It seems like lining it up with school breaks, holiday breaks, might be the most predictable for teachers and students, so that they can like plan for things. I know that there are some parents who may, if the council were to end the mask mandate, may want to take their kids into homeschool or something like that. I've heard that from some constituents, and so it may be good to make it predictable so it can line up with the school break if there are parents that are interested in doing that sort of drastic of measures if the mandate were to end. So I mean, I would be okay with pushing it out to Thanksgiving break or something like that.
And when is our council meeting in December before Christmas?
So, right, so I was just looking up, your meetings in November are the 9th and 16th. And then your meetings in December are the 7th and the 14th.
I mean, so if we went to the 14th, that would be roughly 60 days, a little over 60 days, 62 days, right? We're at the 12th right now.
Yeah.
So if I did math correctly, it would be roughly at that next council meeting. If people were interested, if council members were interested, we could extend this to December 14th and then revisit it on that day, which would be right before Christmas break, to go to Darren's point of kind of saying if at that point we don't want to extend the emergency declaration any further, then people are probably on Christmas break. I don't have school-age children. I just have constituents with school-age children, so I'm guessing that that's roughly where a Christmas break would occur for school-age children. So, I mean, that's on the table. Kind of seems like anything's on the table.
I guess I would,
COVID.
I would advocate for giving teachers and parents as much sort of leeway to plan as possible. Of course, if Dr. Dunn tells us something next week where this is no longer necessary, I mean, I don't want it to go on longer than is scientifically necessary, but I would advocate for pushing it out to a break that parents can plan on.
And I'm not saying that.
And it sounds, sorry, Dan, hold on one second. It sounds to me, though, that if we were to push it to, and Katie, let me know, if we were to push this out to say that December 14th council meeting day, but we found out Dr. Dunn comes in and says, we don't need this anymore, we could actually put it on the next agenda and kind of rescind that and say, we're done, emergency declaration over. Is that accurate, Katie?
Absolutely. You have that flexibility.
And we also just have to remind everybody on the audience here that just because we're moving it to the 14th doesn't say we're going to stop it on the 14th. That again is a day we make a decision to keep extending it through the next 30 days or not, depending on the thresholds we determine are right and the available scientific data we have at that time. So we're just extending it just so we're not making a decision for another 30 days. Or we could just make another decision in 30 days from now on November 9th and then do another one the next month too. I
mean, I'm supportive of moving it to December, but Cindy, you popped on, which always means that there's something to think about.
Just a little suggestion is you don't have to have it end on the same date as your council meeting. So going with what Councilmember Mono said about predictability, you could extend it through the 20th of December. I think by then the school break would have started, and then you will just know that you'll be deciding on December 14th whether to extend it beyond December 20th.
And we received notice from a Salt Lake City School District parent that the school district is out on the 7th.
Okay. There you go. So, and then you can also end it, as Jennifer said, at any meeting before that.
So it sounds to me, just so that when we get into the formal meeting, and I am going to ask for a straw poll on this just from this discussion, so that if when we get into the limited formal meeting, we kind of know what we're voting on, is to extend the emergency declaration to December 20th. With this being on the agenda December 14th to discuss for further extension or not. Does that seem about right? Show your feelings if that seems about right. Okay. Okay. Any further questions or discussions on this? So, Jen?
Because the motion sheet doesn't reflect that, I would hope that you guys would be able to ad lib and that Katie, you're ready to update the ordinance. Thanks.
Okay. So somebody has that in their brain to make that motion when we get into the limited formal meeting, right? I'm looking at you, Dan.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding. Whoever wants to. Okay. If there's no further discussion on that, we can move on to report from the chair and vice chair. Council member Vice Chair Wharton, do you have anything to report?
Hello, I do not.
I'm sorry that you were not a panelist for a while.
That's okay. It was very stressful, but it was all right.
Good, good. I don't have anything to report that I can think of. Miss Executive Director Cindy, do you have anything?
No announcements.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We've already done a closed session, so our work session is now adjourned and we can hop right into our limited formal meeting. So we will see you all there.
Is there another link?
I think you stay here.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
Stay here. Sorry.
Sorry, my bad.
Does somebody need to contact Anna? Because it looks like she bolted.
Yes, we will wait for Anna to get here.
I will
I
text her.
apologize. This is where we have to have the Jeopardy theme music playing. See, everybody started moving their head. Dun, 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 dun. Jen, I'm assuming you're texting Anna. Thank you.
Listen.
I see Anna's tile there, so I'm going to get started. And if she's still logging in, I still have the big old colloquy to read. So welcome to the Salt Lake City Council Limited Formal Meeting. If you are just tuning in, we're holding our meeting remotely due to the declarations of emergency. We first met earlier as the Redevelopment Agency Board followed by meeting as the City Council for a work session to discuss some briefing items. Now we are convening for a limited formal meeting, which means this is not a standard formal meeting and there is no general comment section. Tonight, the agenda only has one new business agenda item, a resolution that would extend Mayor Mendenhall's August 20th proclamation that declared a local emergency related to COVID-19, rising cases, and resurgence of the Delta variant. The next opportunity for public comment will be at next week's council meeting, Tuesday, October 19th at 7 p.m. Also, the council always welcomes your comments by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour comment line 801-535-7654. All agenda-related comments received through any source are shared with the council and added to the council public meeting record within 24 to 48 hours. Thank you to our council staff. For instructions to guide you on how to participate electronically to any of our WebEx meetings, please visit slccouncil.com or call 801-535-7600. We are now moving to the only item of business in our limited formal meeting, which is section E under new business. This is a resolution related to the local emergency declaration extension due to COVID. I will look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the council adopt the resolution extending the declaration of local emergency until 20 December 2021.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Dugan, a second by Councilmember Valdemoros. I will roll call this. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Wharton.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
And I am a yes, and that passes unanimously. We have no other items on our limited formal meeting. I appreciate everyone for being here and for watching. This meeting is adjourned. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.